Hey, queens, kings, and royal theys. What's good? It feels weird not talking to Layla. Just for anyone that's not brand new, I'm used to talking to someone else now. It feels weird to stream alone. It feels weird to talk to an empty room. I got so used to it before, and now I'm not at all used to it. But yeah, welcome. We're going to chit chat today. It's going to be kind of like a little more chill because mainly it's been a tough couple of days just like in life. Science is tough. I got to see Layla in person recently because she went to a conference that's kind of near where I live. So I took the train going anywhere. Well, actually not going anywhere. I took the train to Philadelphia. But yeah, Dougylicious, thanks for the sticker redeem. I saw that before. Oh yeah, the picture. I can't remember what even picture it was. I'm wearing this shirt backwards. You guys, that's how today's going. Okay, we're just gonna rectify this. You'd think I would know. It's like a pretty big logo difference front to back, but anyways. Yeah, Layla and I had a really nice in-person visit, first in-person visit in a long time. So that was nice, and that's why she's not here today, because she's still... Oh, it was the homo hut. Right, okay, so in Philadelphia, we went to, not the gay village. They don't call it the gay village like they do in New York, Montreal, or most metropolitan areas. They call it the gayborhood, which feels correct, but also is like kind of unserious in a way that I was like, the gayborhood? Like, oh yeah, I live in the gayborhood. You know, it feels like something that like a realty company would call like their Pride Month special, like, come to the gayborhood, gays, hi gay. So I'm not the hugest fan of it, but I also kind of liked it. Anyway, so what Doug's referring to is we sent him a picture of me in front of a pizza joint that's in the gayborhood, called the Homo Hut, and it was styled like the Pizza Hut logo. I don't know how these people haven't gotten a cease and desist, or maybe they have and they just don't care. But it said the Homo Hut, and what you couldn't see is behind where my body was standing in this picture. I am standing in front of we want to be inside you, I think is what they say. So like the joke is like, ha ha ha, eating pizza, but also the joke is want to be inside you. And Doug, I'm sorry about ads. I probably know how to turn them off 2 years ago, but I don't know how to turn them off now. Now, you did redeem a stick the sticker. I had to dig out just stickers, which luckily I kind of have stashed in random places everywhere. So this is not my full stash, you'll note, but this is just some I had kicking around. So we have this very nice dog mama. It's giving, Karen a little bit, but dog Karen. So if you choose that, just know that you'll be branding me in such a fashion as to radiate live, laugh, love energy. But you know what? That happens. And then I have possibly appropriative dream catcher with moth, which I really like because I have a moth tattooed on my stomach, pretty big one. And this looks nice, but I feel the mandala dream catcher vibe not ideal in terms of appropriation. So I've saved the best for last, which is number one, this guy that says Skater Boy. He looks like he lives in Montreal, based on that hat that covers absolutely zero of his head. And y'all got any lamps? Yeah, that moth is cute, actually. Like, it's a cute vibe, but I just don't know how cool it would be to like just edge into appropriation of multiple indigenous cultures globally. And then this one has all my flabbers are gasted. And I believe I maybe got this as a gift. I want to say Nanners the Great maybe gave this to me. Old school people know who that is. Anyways, I really like, he speaks to me. This skeleton. I don't know the gender of this skeleton. I don't know why I'm speaking like that. But yeah, Skelly here. I feel like as though I am Skelly lately. So you just tell me which one you want stuck and it'll go on my Stanley You're Feeling Skater. First of all, it's pink And obviously my favorite color is pink, despite me telling people it's red, because I got so patriarchy pilled that I used to be like, I don't like pink, and just secretly started accumulating many things that are pink. Like that blanket's pink. This microphone's pink. Frankly, I'm pink. The light's pink right now. Drink, pink drink. The drink inside is even pink because I dilute some cranberry juice. So realistically, I don't know what I was talking about. And I'm also having a lot of trouble with this. How many doctorates do you need to stick a sticker? All right, here we go. Get ready for the satisfying. Where are we gonna put it? Okay, so my birthday rat sticker he's seen better days. It's pretty cute, but his little snout's coming off. Look at him. That was a gift as well. I feel like just like prime real estate back here is gonna be good. Yeah. Let's go with that. So we'll start it. We'll give you guys all the satisfying stick. Oh yeah, that's nice. There we go. She was a skater boy. They said, see you later, boy. So yeah, today we're going to talk about a paper that came out in January, actually, from a journal called Scientific Reports, which, for those of you not in the science game, it's a pretty good journal. And the way that we measure whether something's a good journal or not is kind of a little bit by reputation, kind of in the same way you would with pop media, like the New York Times, you take more seriously than like Blart News or whatever that one that all the Republican people follow is. But there actually is a metric in the science world where you can measure basically how impactful each of the journal articles in that journal are to the scientific world by how much they're cited. And there's a little bit of controversy as to how much that matters. I don't think it matters a huge amount. There are such things as predatory journals where they'll come and they'll get you to pay to be in the journal, or sometimes they'll pay you, but it doesn't go under the scrutiny of peer review, which is obviously the gold standard of academia. So I'll get into a little bit of kind of just how that works, how this paper works, how we measure the stuff in the paper. I'm going to share the screen so you guys can see it. And I actually should find the citation and pop it in. I also didn't do the Discord blast saying I was live, which I completely forgot. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. Sorry, folks, for not doing that. Also, my Norton antivirus software has apparently... my subscription is over, so just oopsie. Yeah, so we're just gonna go here and be like live right now. And we're gonna copy the link from right there. Copy text. Yeah. Oh dear. Oh, I copied way too much text. I copied the entire text of the thing I was trying to copy and not just the link. There we go. All right, so we've done that. We're just doing a little bit of admin. Which is fine. Okay. First of all, okay, before I start talking about real science, can I talk about some fake science a little bit right now? Because I went and saw the movie Project Hail Mary, and holy moly, it's so good. Yeah, it's incredible. If you've not read the book, I would highly recommend it. I think I sang the praises of this book recently, maybe on stream. No, it was during D&D. Anyways, it's a really good book. If you haven't read it, it's amazing. If you're an audiobook person, or frankly, even if you're not an audiobook person, it's also worth checking out because they do voices, and there's certain characters in there that have an auditory kind of idiosyncrasy to them, to not spoil it. And Ryan Reynolds, hysterical, really, really fun to watch. And it's really sciencey. The guy that wrote it, Andy Weir, is the same guy that wrote The Martian. So that one with, God, what's his name? Matt Damon. The one with Matt Damon where he's stuck on Mars. Andy Weir wrote that. And I've immediately forgot what I'm looking up. Project Hail Mary. Maybe I'll get there. I forgot what I was looking up. God damn it. Anyways, this is going to go well. I'm going to be talking about like hard science stuff and just completely obliviously forgetting this. You know what? It'll come back to me. And if it doesn't come back to me, then that's just, it's gone. It's gone for good. Yeah, it was a really good film. I really enjoyed it. If you haven't seen it, you should go see it. It was definitely worth the $1 million it costs to go to the cinema these days. And yeah, high endorsement for that. Now, I had to refine, as you'll see, I have the little like kind of aesthetic chat thing going. I don't have my little Neuralicia thing over the top anymore, like I did before, because this is a new computer. Since we started restreaming again, I haven't had the time to like make it look cute, but I did my best to make it look cute. So there's this little rat guy down in the bottom of the chat, which I think is really cute. Really like it. But I also had a share screen thing, I hope is set up. So we're just going to give it a go and we're going to hope for the best. And I'm going to do that now so we can start talking about this paper. Look at that transition. Oh, we love it. Okay. I hope you can still hear me. I think you can still hear me. It looks like you can still hear me. So I'm just going to assume that you can still hear me. Making this wider makes it wider like that. I don't love that. Okay. I didn't know that was what was going to happen when I did this. So we're just going to roll with it. Because what I'd like to do actually, is make it so that I can see the fucking chat, not just in the thing. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like that is going to be possible. If I minimize it, it minimizes it away. I didn't know really how to kind of tech check this. I didn't know how to tech check this prior to doing it. So I think what I'm going to have to do is, yeah, you go over there. Oh no. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to put this over here. I'm moving around screens. No one can see this, but I need to be able to see this. So sorry, I'm in and out packing to leave tonight. Well, thank you, Dougylicious, for participating in chat. And thank you for those of you that are lurking, if indeed there are lurkers. Thank you for just any participation that you have. And if you want to just kick back and listen to me talk about neuroscience, then, I mean, that's kind of the mandate here. So as my stream title suggested and as my little go live notification suggested, what we're going to be talking about is this paper that talks about how cannabidiol reduces oxycodone self-administration while preserving analgesic efficacy in a rat model of neuropathic pain. And to someone outside of neuroscience, that probably sounds outside of science, maybe. That probably sounds like a little bit jargony, and frankly, it is. So we're going to talk about, first of all, what cannabidiol is. Most people know what oxycodone is. It's an opioid, so we'll touch on that. Self-administration, so that's giving the drug to yourself. In this case, this is in a rat model. So we're going to talk about how you can train rats to give themselves drugs and what that looks like. Lots of people have questions about the ethics of that and, you know, how the rats experience pain, especially because this is a pain study. So as a pain expert, we can also talk about that and dig into a little bit of the kind of the quagmire that is ethics in that. And okay, welcome back, Dougylicious. Love a good analgesic. Frankly, I know that you don't, because you've given me your prescription analgesics before and been like, I don't need these. And I still have one from like fucking 8 years ago when we lived together, because I ration them for when I have a really bad migraine that my migraine medicine doesn't help. Add dog make better. It's not. Is there a delay? It appears as though, okay, so this chat says one thing. That chat says another thing. Oh boy. Okay. Well, that's a thing that's happening. I can see ahead in the chat and the chat is not caught up on the screen. So that's fine. So just if you're reading chat on the screen, you have to be patient. Yeah, well, yes. So, okay. I'm feeling skater. See, I keep looking at that one thinking that that's the most recent. I need to, oh dear, this is, I think your chat is low down in your chat box. Oh, it is. Yo. Okay, we can handle that. I can adjust that right now. Okay. Does it resize it for the whole thing? Maybe. Okay, so if it's 800, maybe 600 tall? Aha! See, this is what happens when people are on a team. Hey, look at that. We solved a problem. We solved it. We solved the problem. Teamwork makes the dream work. Really proud of us. Really proud of me. I thought that it was on a delay because I've seen very recently, actually, I found a couple of really good streamers that I'm super enthusiastic about. One is Valoria, Valoria_X. I forget how to do a shout out, for fuck's sakes. Do you go /SO? No, that's not right. Shout out. Fuck. I want to give her a legitimate shout out, but I think we're just going to have to roll with it. She's a really cool neuroscientist. I believe their pronoun is she, her, but I'm judging based on, so VALOURIA, Valuria _X. And they're a neuroscientist that works in primate neuroscience. I believe they're towards the end of their PhD, which is really cool. They do a lot of electrophysiology, so they're measuring actual like patterns of firing in neurons in the brains of non-human primates. So this is, I think, probably macaques. Is usually like a rhesus macaque, which is a type of monkey. Is one of the common ones. But anyways, yeah, here I'll type it Valuria _X. There we go. No, I typed it in the wrong thing. Damn it. Why is this so hard? Oh, you gave her a shout out. Okay. I love you. I love you so much. You're perfect and wonderful. No notes, no flaws whatsoever. Yeah, it's because I'm stressed, y'all. I'm having a real fucking time these days. You're fine. Well. And the other one, I can't remember what their handle is on Twitch. It's something like ribosome fucking, it's some advanced name that frankly I should know how to. Rhacodactylus. Actually, it looks like they're live right now. So maybe I'll raid out to them later and show you guys them. They study like ethics and beliefs and like a bunch of crazy stuff like that, which is like pretty neat, pretty cool stuff. So let's just get back to this this study. Okay, so first of all, talking about defining the things just in the title here to make it more understandable. So cannabidiol is CBD. You guys hear about it probably a lot in, you know, talking about pain, treating pain with alternative medicines and stuff like that. Lots of people talk about cannabidiol as opposed to THC. So THC is notoriously the intoxicating part of weed, or Mary Jane, or whatever the kids are calling it these days. If you pulled up their stream, we can hear it. Oh dear. Oh no. Oh dear. Oh Christ. I just closed it. I didn't need the tab open. I'm just one of those freaks that once they open a tab, I necro tab. I have tabs from years ago, just living in my head rent free. I actively have 7 tabs in my mind going right now. I don't know where the music is coming from. There's pop-ups. Here, I have pop-ups. Call those intrusive thoughts, my friend. My friends, plural. So yeah, cannabidiol is CBD. So it is a non-intoxicating, you'll notice here it says not, why won't it let me highlight this? This is some bullshit. It is a non-intoxicating compound found in cannabis. So cannabis is notoriously, gives you certain symptoms. Lots of people believe in the difference between an indica and a sativa. It's not really a thing. None of the science really bears that out. We believe it's an expectancy effect. And so that's just kind of a little side note. CBD, we think may work for pain, but studies like this study came out, I believe it was January of this year. 2016. something like that. Or 2016. 2026, Alicia. Jeez Louise. Yeah, so it's been shown to have therapeutic potential without abuse liability. And what this study looked at is the effects of CBD on oxycodone self-administration and hyperalgesia in an animal model. And here's a pet peeve of mine. When scholars, when scientists and academics that do non-human research or preclinical research call their models an animal model, like that distinguishes it from human research, as if human beings aren't animals. So most of the time, what I would prefer is if they said rodent models, or if you were using a monkey or something that's like a non-human primate, you would say non-human primate. But lots of people just say animal as if humans aren't animals, which is just a little pet peeve of mine. So just a little insight into the many things that upset me. So yeah, in this animal or non-human animal model of chronic neuropathic pain, we're going to talk about kind of what that looks like. So CBD is cannabidiol. That's the kind of like non-intoxicating compound found in cannabis. Oxycodone is a pretty famous opioid analgesic that is used in pain management, particularly for severe pain. And is something that I think a lot of people are familiar with because of the opioid crisis. Now, when we talk about self-administration in a rodent model, we're not talking about them taking a little rat pill, which is kind of like what I think a lot of people, and myself included, shit, I forgot I can't do that. Can I move it? Can I move it? No, I can't move it. Oh boy. Oh fuck. What have I done? Why can't I? I hate this. I hate it. I just want to be able to see two things at once. Like, am I asking for too much? Am I asking for too much to be able to see multiple things at one time? It's my own fault that I can't. But whatever. That's fine. Now I can't see the chat except for in the thing. But that's okay. We're not feeling chatty today anyway, it seems. So, in rodent self-administration, there's such thing as oral self-administration, but it usually has to be done by a liquid so that you can dissolve the drug in it, because what tends to happen is a rodent is put in a little box, and maybe I'll see if I can find, I don't think that they have a little image of it, which is too bad. Let's just go rat self-admin. Don't worry, folks. This is Microsoft Edge. I've never used it in my entire life, so none of this is going to dox me. Self-administration. Fucking Microsoft Bing. Oh, what a way to go. So yeah, it looks like we'll use this little image. This looks helpful. Okay. So this thing, they're connected subcutaneously. So underneath the skin, between their scapula, so between their shoulder blades on their back, there's a little port that you can connect, as this diagram shows, to an external liquid pump. This is to do intravenous self-administration, which obviously has to be done with liquid. Let's see if we can find, this is actually what it looks like. Oh, no, here we go. This is what it looks like. This is actually the exact type that I have used in previous lab work, which I don't do anymore. But basically, this little thin tube that you can see goes and connects outside of this little chamber to a syringe pump that will deliver a bit of drug to the rat, usually based on one of their behaviors, but sometimes not. So if they have a little lever in there or a nose poke or something like that, and they respond on it, it'll tell the computer that's connected to all this to deliver one dose of the drug. And this tube goes down into this metal coil sheath that's on that tube, so the rat can't chew on it because they will. And you'll see that this port is sticking out of their back, and that tube actually within here, there's a separate tube, because you need to be able to connect and unconnect them. There's a separate tube that goes in on the dorsal side, so where a dorsal fin would be on a fish, goes in through the dorsal side over the shoulder, subcutaneously again. There's a little tube and it'll go right into their jugular vein. So basically, it's a jugular catheter. So if anybody knows what we would call a catheter in normal everyday life, is the thing that goes inside your urethra to help you pee when you otherwise can't get to the bathroom or don't have control of your bladder, or, you know, that sort of thing. But in most cases, what that is, if you really think about it, is putting a tube inside another tube. So in this case, we're catheterizing the jugular vein, and you can catheterize various veins and arteries that are coming from anywhere in the heart. Usually it's close to the heart when things like that need to be like stented and stuff like that. That's a similar way that you can catheterize things. But in this case, we catheterize it to the port on the back that they can then be connected and disconnected from the external device that can deliver the drug to the rat. And so that's a really good way to see how much the rat will actually take of a drug of their own volition, because that's supposed to be kind of a better estimation of their motivation to take the drug, is how much they'll do the thing. Because if we just go and give them an injection of it ourselves, we don't know whether the rat wanted that, whether the rat would choose that, whether the rat would work for that, whether the rat would sacrifice one thing to get access to that or endure something like a shock. And all of these experiments have been done. So yeah, that's self-administration. And hyperalgesia, as the name suggests, is hyper, so more of, rather than hypo, less of. Hyper, and then algesia. And algesia is just a fancy science word for pain. So when you hear about analgesia or analgesics, you're talking about something to do with pain, and hyperalgesia is an enhanced pain state. So we've already talked about the animal model thing, but when we talk specifically about animal models of chronic neuropathic pain, there's a couple of different ways that can go. For the most part, it's going to be due to something where you will kind of mess with one of their nerves, for lack of a better term, or lack of a better way to describe it. So in most cases, you use what's called the spared nerve injury model, or the SNI model, where you go to a major nerve in their thigh. You open the thigh muscle up and you go inside the muscle, you find the nerve and you tie a knot around it. And so essentially what that does is it sends continuous signals up to the brain saying something's happening in this vein. And what neuropathic pain tends to be, or what people that experience neuropathic pain tend to describe it as, is kind of like if you hit your funny bone, that sort of aversive tingling sort of ouch, rather than a throbbing pain or a sharp pain. It's got that kind of tingly aversiveness. If anyone's ever had like frozen shoulder, it's kind of like that, but rather than being numb, it would come with a bit of pain or something sort of aversive in that way as well. So that's kind of what these guys started with. They used male rats, another fun pet peeve of mine. Even rats have the patriarchal advantage, so that's great. We love that. We love to see it. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. Obviously, we hate it. It's actually surprising because for a long time, I'm going to tangent a lot, and we're probably not going to get anywhere near through this paper in the time frame that we have set up, but I don't care because it's my stream right now, not your stream. If you have a stream, you can read the whole paper if you want. So we're just going to roll with it. But in Canada, and I think in the US, the major federal granting agencies, so this is the NIH, or I don't even know what they call it, Health Canada. In Canada, Canada has a couple of separate, like, lower down bodies that kind of go into the sciences. So there's the Canadian Institute of Health Research and the National Sciences and Engineering Council of Canada, Research Council, NSERC and CIHR in Canada. And what they do when you're applying for a grant, if you want to use only one sex, if your study involves anything, obviously if you're doing cells, you don't have to talk about that unless you're talking about gametes, which is, like a reproductive sort of related thing. But usually you have to justify if you're not going to include multiple genders if it's human research, multiple sexes if it's on a species without a gender construct, which, as far as we are aware, is everything but human beings. You have to explain why. Because historically, there's this heuristic, this belief in the milieu that says that female of any species are more variable. And what they blame that on is obviously the cycle. So the reproductive cycle in a rodent, it's like 4 to 7 days that they go through their full cycle, and they call it an estrus cycle in rodents. And obviously in human beings, it tends to be a 21-day cycle. That's a woman's period. But the idea is, because of the hormone fluctuations that happen over the course of a longer period of time, what a lot of scientists believed, erroneously, by the way, this has been debunked, is that female of their species, I'm going to just talk about rats because that's what I know the most about, females of these species are more variable than males. So that was the popular belief, but no one had studied females enough to even know this. So the fact that that was just like carte blanche believed is absolutely bonkers to me. They just decided that and were like, we're not going to include them because probably. And then it turned out they were wrong. And now we've been doing rodent research for like hundreds of years, maybe not hundreds, 150 at least of like the formal kind of research. And we've been doing mostly males, unless you're doing explicitly female related research to do with, you know, estrogen or estradiol or anything like that. So the fact that these guys got away with using male only rats annoys me, because it's just as easy to just use some females too. It doesn't do anything. If there's no effect that changes based on the sex, then you just add them together and you have the same number. What people tend to want to avoid, I think, rather than being outright misogynist, not misogynist because it's rats, so I guess you can't really be misogynist against a male rat, but kind of gender exclusionary or sex exclusionary in this case. I think what they want is to not have the hassle of, if they find an effect of sex, such that in this case cannabidiol has an effect on male rats but not on female rats, because then they have to explain that, and having to explain that is outside of a lot of these people's purview, because they're like, I'm an addiction scientist, I'm a pain scientist, I don't talk about gender, I don't talk about sex, which is frankly fucking idiotic, right? Sorry, I get really annoyed about this, but it's really self-serving, it's really close-minded, and it really excludes a lot of potentially really interesting and meaningful stuff. Like, we're talking about pain here. We're talking about neuropathic pain, which in things like fibromyalgia, which is one of the major causes of neuropathic pain, happens more in females. So why the fuck are we trying to model this in a male rat? Like, I don't understand. It's preposterous, frankly. But I'll put that aside for now. So they used male rats. They were trained to self-administer the oxycodone. We don't really need to concern ourselves with the amount. Just know that it's a really small but weight-matched dose to make it so the rat is, you know, they're going to be noticeable effects, but not that they're going to be risking overdose. And usually these models will build in a timeout so the rat can't just go more until it's so high that it dies or overdoses, because frankly, we wouldn't be allowed to ethically without having some sort of boundary in there. So that's why they keep it to this really, really small amount per infusion. And an infusion is just one dose. So each time they press a lever, they get one infusion, one dose. And if they press it again, they get another one. They were trained to self-administer the oxycodone. They were trained to self-administer the opioid. And then they underwent a chronic constriction injury. So I described an SNI, a spared nerve injury. A chronic constriction injury is much the same. So you basically are just messing with one of the peripheral nerves, usually in the thigh. In this case, it would be in the thigh of the sciatic nerve, or they receive what's called a sham surgery. And a sham surgery is just basically making it so that we keep the effect of the actual surgical incision separate from the pain that comes from the neuropathic source. So we want to know how much neuropathic pain is contributing to the effects we might see, not how much the actual incisional pain. So we need to give our control rats, who aren't going to be in neuropathic pain, we need to give those control rats a surgery that makes them as close to the other rats as possible, but keeping our independent variable, in this case, is the injury or the presence of chronic pain or not. We want to keep it as close to that as possible and only be tweaking that one specific thing. And that's kind of the gold standard of science, is to keep everything the same except for the one thing that you're changing. Because if you let, temperature in the room, how much they've eaten, a whole bunch of other stuff be as variable as it would in nature, and then you're like, oh, I want to see the effects of, blowing an air horn in the rat's face or something like that, which you wouldn't really do that, but, then if you had a difference between the groups, that might be cool. And you could be like, oh yeah, males and females experience air horn effects differently. This is such a messy example. But you wouldn't be able to say that it wasn't because, okay, the females have higher access to food than the males. You have to keep all of these things the exact same for you to be able to confidently say that your results are because of your manipulation to one of the variables. And what we call the variables that kind of get in the way, the alternate explanations, are what we call confound variables. So they would confound our results. We don't want that. Okay, so how they measured the pain after getting the sciatic nerve injury to give them neuropathic pain in a chronic fashion, or the sham surgery to give them no pain, essentially in the long run, is they measure something called paw withdrawal latency using something that's called the Hargreaves test, or the thermal hyperalgesia test. So essentially what the Hargreaves test it's an indicator of thermal pain sensitivity, as this sentence here suggests. And basically what you do is, I don't know who here is old enough, but probably if you're in my audience or one of my friends are of the age that you remember back before flashlights were LEDs. And if you had a flashlight and you kept it on for a while, you can feel it being hot. And sometimes they can get really hot. So if you focus a beam of light enough, it will be quite painful in a thermal way. And if you do it enough, you could start a fire, obviously, or burn someone's flesh. But we have a little machine that you can set to certain parameters so that it won't damage tissue, but will cause basically a ramping up. It'll start just at normal, and then it'll get increasingly more and more and more hot to either the ceiling of the settings of the machine, or until the rat or the mouse pulls their paw away from the beam. And we measure that as basically their latency. So how long does it take for them to withdraw their paw or their extremity, wherever they're measuring this, away from that noxious or painful stimuli. And they call it the Hargreaves test because the guy that discovered it, I think his name was Ken Hargreaves, I want to say. If Layla was here, she'd be able to tell me if that's true or not. But in any event, I just want to check and make sure that I'm seeing everything here. I am. Okay, great. Okay, so they tested paw withdrawal latencies in the control animals, or the sham animals, and the CCI animals, so the pain animals. And they gave them CBD before each of the self-administration sessions. I'm guessing after they trained them, because they want to train them naively. So after they give them this pain, they then give them 0, 1, 3, or 10 milligrams per kilogram of cannabidiol, or CBD, and they give it to them IP. So you'll see here that it says IP. And what that means is intraperitoneal. So that means it goes into your peritoneal cavity. which is where your viscera are. So all of your major organs that are basically kind of below the diaphragm in this place, or in this case. And you inject the drug into the kind of juice that's around all of the organs. You want to not hit any of the organs. That's something that we're trained very well to do. And you stick the needle in there, pull back a little bit on the needle to make sure you're not seeing any blood, because that would indicate that you hit some sort of varicosity, blood vessel, something like that, or that you hit an organ of some kind, which we obviously don't want to do. So if you do that, you pull back, you don't see anything, then you plunge. That means that you're basically just putting this drug, in this case CBD, kind of floating around your abdominal cavity, around your intestines, around your liver, around your pancreas, around your spleen, all of those sorts of things. And this is a relatively quick way to administer. It's not as quick as intravenous self-administration, or intravenous administration of any kind, self or otherwise. It's not as quick as inhalation, but it is faster than subcutaneous. I did yoga and now I'm mega calm. Raffle iron shelf. Raffle. Just called you a shelf. I'm so sorry. I'm having a little bit of a struggle here. I'm really happy that you did yoga. I used to do tons of yoga. Now I do no yoga. I sometimes stretch. In fact, I'm going to just have a little cheeky stretch right now. Just going to stretch my human body. I'm really glad that you did some yoga, Raffle iron. And we're talking about rats smoking weed. So in this case, we're actually talking about them not smoking weed, but getting a dose of one of the compounds that's in weed, CBD, which a lot of people are going to be familiar with from just kind of the decriminalization of marijuana in general. It's one of the compounds that's non-intoxicating. So you can basically take like hero doses of CBD and not be intoxicated, because the intoxicating effects of weed come from the THC. Gotta maintain that meat mech. I want that on a sticker. Meat mech. The meat mechanisms. Yeah, you do. Yoga makes sure the joints aren't stressing each other. Listen, every joint in my body is stressing every other joint in my body 24/7, 365. And you want to know what? I think the meat might be stressing the joints out too. I think everybody's stressing everything out here. The whole body, tip to tail. My hair might even be stressed. Actually, my hair is very nice and long and silky. It hasn't had a haircut in a while, but it's okay with that. Leisha, you sound stressed. I am. It's been a kind of challenging interpersonal time for me, I would say. I mean, I like to keep my private life private off stream, but yeah. It's stressful out there for sure. Yeah. Keep your friends close and fuck your enemies. Not like fuck your enemies, like just screw those guys. Don't screw them either. You know what I mean? I'm just not even going to get into that. So yeah, we're not talking about rats smoking weed. Though there are some researchers that do have inhalation chambers, which is really cool. I think they're mostly on the West Coast. Not at all surprising. It's very on brand for West Coast people. I believe there's some people in Southern California at University of California, I think at Irvine, that do it. Maybe don't have anything published though yet. They do have vapor chambers, I'm pretty sure. And then there's people at UW, so University of Washington, like Washington State. The sciences are a battlefield for politics during times when empires are expanding. You know what? I don't even know that the empire needs to be expanding. I think just sciences are a battlefield for politics in the presence of capitalism, which I guess is when empires are expanding, because that is capitalism's model, is uninhibited growth. But anyways, keep your heart safe. Good advice. Love that, Raffle Iron Chef. Thanks for being here. So yeah, let's get back to this. So they give them the drug in their intraperitoneal cavity. So they go in, I don't want to say high because this is a non-intoxicating compound that comes from marijuana, but they go in under the influence of CBD while they're in pain, and they're allowed to give themselves basically as much as they want of an potent opioid painkiller. So what the kind of interesting question that they're asking here is whether or not CBD changes the amount of opioid that a rat will take when they're in neuropathic pain. So what the kind of implications of this could be is maybe CBD can mitigate the addictive component or the reinforcing component of oxycodone, because we know it's highly addictive, without interrupting its ability to disrupt pain. So still an effective painkiller, less addictive. That's the dream. We really want that. And currently I'm studying a completely different compound that we're finding very similar results, not with neuropathic pain, but with a different pain model. And it's really exciting because for a long time, people were overprescribing opioids, and then we had the opioid crisis, and now getting your pain managed is nearly impossible. So a lot of people, if you go in, you're like, I'm in pain, the doctors are trained to put you basically through a gauntlet to make sure that you actually are in pain and that you're in enough pain to have your pain treated, because they think of a lot of this stuff as drug-seeking behavior, which a lot of the time it is. But of course you're seeking drugs when you're in pain. That's what you should be doing. And if we didn't have this kind of negative idea of drug seeking and addiction in the first place, if it didn't have that strong stigma, then maybe a doctor treating someone for their pain wouldn't be like, drug seeking behavior means you can't get your pain treated. And there are a lot of good doctors out there. But what happened after the opioid crisis was this overcorrect. So the people are really hesitant to prescribe opioids because A, they do have addiction liability, high addiction liability. And B, they don't want to get sued. They don't want to get put in like a malpractice suit. They don't want to be responsible for someone's life devolving into addiction. So if we can find something that you can co-administer alongside the opioid that makes it so the opioid still gives you the pain relief, but doesn't or decreases your addiction liability or the propensity towards developing addiction to this substance, that's chef's kiss. If we can do that, that's amazing. That's a game changer. So nod seriously and sits down to listen. I love that. We do not have to be serious in here. My name of the game is still chaos in this house. Always still chaos. My dog's not even laying down. I gave her little dragon toy and she didn't even want to curl up with it. She hurt her leg on the weekend. Fucking Christ. That's not even the biggest thing going on in my life. My dog hurt her leg. And that's low on the totem pole of things. That's how crazy it is over here, guys. Guys, non-gendered, by the way. Doctors hear pain and think liability. Absolutely. I have to go, but it was nice. I only had 5 minutes. Well, thank you so much for stopping in either way, Raffle Iron. And as always, thank you for participating in the chat. It's always nice to have thoughts, musings, and fun, chaotic or not. We welcome any commentary that's not harmful to others. So glad you had some yoga fun. Thank you for stopping by. Really appreciate it. So let's get back into science. So before the self-administration sessions, they are given these doses of CBD, and then they test the pain of these rats afterwards. Keep in mind, I've scanned this paper once, so I'm getting this as I'm reading it with you guys. We're doing this kind of like along the way so you can see what it's like for a scientist to read a paper and get a little bit of the inside track about this. So my first question about this pain measurement being conducted afterwards, let's do a different color. So the pain testing is conducted afterwards, which makes sense, right? They're wanting to see, hey, does the oxycodone still relieve the neuropathic pain in this case? That's important. That's one of their dependent variables. However, when you're doing self-administration, one rat might go gangbusters. One rat might be like, I love oxy, give me more oxy, and just press it to the max that they're allowed to without having a timeout to prevent them from overdosing. And one rat might be like, I'm good, and everything in between. So where I'm probably going to be a little bit more picky with evaluating this study is whether or not they scale their analgesic results to the amount that the rodents take, right? Because if you had a lowered threshold of their paw withdrawal away from the heat source, then, or if you had a higher threshold, because higher means it takes them longer, which means the pain relief is working. So actually what you would want is a longer latency. So it takes longer for them to take their paw away from the noxious stimuli rather than being like really fast. That would be a fast withdrawal reflex. That would indicate pain hypersensitivity. And obviously, if you're on more oxycodone, it's probably going to be more analgesically efficacious than if they took a little bit of it. Even if, they have it at the lower dose, they might get to the higher dose eventually anyway at their plasma levels, the levels in their blood, basically. So that's the first kind of issue. The second issue is opioids are a depressant. Opioids are known to decrease locomotor activity and locomotor ability. They're sedating. That's one of the dangerous things about opioids is it sedates your whole body systems enough that if you do that enough, you die because your diaphragm doesn't move anymore, so you stop breathing. Or your heart stops pumping because there's so much nervous system depression. So I hope what I'm going to see as we continue on this paper, it's already 8:15, which is crazy. I haven't even gotten through the abstract. I love it. Yeah. If they took a lot of drugs, it might take them a long time to take their paw away from the stimulus anyway, regardless of whether or not their analgesia has been maxed out and, those sorts of things. So these are the things that you have to consider when you're being a scientist. This sounds like a great study at the surface. And if they controlled for these things or at least addressed that as a shortcoming of the study later on in the discussion, I'll be happy. If they acted all la-di-da, I would have a little bit more problem. But obviously it passed the rigor required to get published in this publication. So now their results. Let's just change colors here. Pink. We love results. We're going to go pink. So the rats acquired the oxycodone self-administration. That just means they were successfully trained. They're saying that this is indicated by more active than inactive lever presses. So if we go back to the self-administration images, in this case, why is this lady here? This has nothing to do with rodent self-administration. Why is it showing that? I don't understand. Let's find a little image that has kind of more of our vibe. Okay, let's use this one. It's a little bit small, but we're going to go with it. See how there's a left and a right? So in this case, they're nose pokes, it looks like. But in a lot of cases, they're levers. And it looks like in the case of our paper, they're levers. So basically what they're saying is one of the levers will trigger the infusion of the drug. One of them will give them their drug. The other one is going to do nothing in most cases. In this case, they're going to call it the inactive lever because it doesn't do anything. And basically what they're saying is the rats successfully learned that the active lever is the drug. So we know that they're doing this on purpose and not by random chance. So they're going to look at the proportion of responding on the active lever versus the inactive lever as an indicator that they can tell that one thing does something that the other thing doesn't. And you can do this with food and various other things. So if we scroll down, it looks like they said something about their results. Okay, yeah, acquisition of oxycodone IVSA, that's just standing for intravenous self-administration. And we're looking at the active lever, that's the black dots here, and the inactive lever, the red squares. And for those of you that are colorblind, it's going to be circles active, squares inactive. If there is anyone colorblind, I like to be inclusive. And we're looking at on the y-axis, the number of lever presses per 2 hours, it looks like. So it looks like they max out around 40 presses every 2 hours, which is low. That's low. People might not know that because you would have to do this kind of work to know that, but that's low. But it's possible because oxycodone has a long half-life that they get high at the beginning and kind of self-titrate, because we haven't gone over exactly how long the training is and how long their sessions are. Obviously longer than 2 hours, but what we're seeing here, this is sessions, so I'm guessing these are days. They probably do it in 14 days. 14 days is a long time to train them as well, just for those of you that are curious. And what you can see is for the first week, usually, kind of 5 to 7 days, the rats don't distinguish between the active and the inactive lever. And though I just said that as though this is a typical result, I'm shocked that it's not sooner. I used in my master's research a short-acting opioid called remifentanil. And it's essentially, it acts on a scale of kind of minutes rather than hours. And what we found is they distinguished very quickly between the active and the inactive lever. And what I'm thinking might be the explanation here is, again, they have several lever presses at the beginning and they're like, oh, I'm high. And they kind of just dick around with one lever and the other, not noticing that the high is acutely and really temporally aligned in time with their responding. So the quicker of onset and the more precise and limited the onset of something is in association with the response that elicited that result, the closer those things are, the more reinforcing that's going to be. So the good example in your everyday life would be if your dog does something you don't like and you punish them, which you shouldn't do. Positive reinforcement works better than negative, but that's besides the point. And you punish them. If you do it right away, right after the action that you didn't want, that's going to be way more efficacious than if you do it an hour later. The dog's going to be like, I don't know, does that have to do with that? They don't have any kind of like temporal reasoning. And because you have no language shared between you and other species, it's impossible to explain that. So the best way to kind of make these things link together is to have them precisely time aligned and to let that pattern be found out over and over again, where in this case you're using a drug with a long half-life, that might actually take a little bit more pairings for them to find out, okay, it's this one. Because what they probably do when they go in is they probably go sniff around and they're like, great, hit that lever. That did something, but not immediately. Hit that lever too. Okay, I'm going to tick around, hit this one, hit that one. And then in the next kind of, 60 seconds to a minute, they're going to be high. But if they've been beep bop on each lever during that time, they're not going to learn right away that that's the cause of it, especially if they stay high for another hour or 2 or however long. In this case, it would be, I think the half-life of oxycodone is like 4 hours. I should probably know this. You know what? We're going to look it up, guys. We're going to learn together. See, these are the things that you have to think about. Half-life of oxycodone. Look at that. I was right. Just under 4 hours, according to drugs.com, which honestly probably shouldn't just immediately trust drugs.com. But given that that was my initial thought, and I'm, pretty well trained in addiction, neuroscience, and this sort of behavior, I'm going to go with it. But if you weren't, just confirming something for yourself, and even in that case, the best practice would be to get a reputable source and to look at what we call PK or pharmacokinetic data. That would tell you the actual half-life according to like plasma levels. But that might be a bit too granular for what we're talking about here. Okay, so by day 7, they're reliably distinguishing between the active and the inactive lever, such that their responses on the inactive lever seem to basically disappear to fewer than 10 lever presses for every 2 hours, that's small. And you would expect for them to never really go away completely, because the rat's always going to be like, I don't know, I'm bored. I'm going to hit this one, see if it does anything cool. And this is looking at their actual intake across animals. I don't really know why this is particularly interesting for any reason. I guess it's just to show that they're taking approximately the same amount in milligrams per kilogram. But yeah, anyways, I guess that kind of maybe addresses the concern I had earlier about the differential amounts of oxy that they get. No, you want to know why it is? I just remembered. This is to show that they're all getting approximately the same amount of the drug prior to having the test happen. And it's actually not showing all the individual rats, which I would like better than just seeing this average line across all of the rats. However, because these error bars are quite tight, that means that the variability between the highest and the lowest individual that makes up that data point, because I think there's, let's see how many subjects there were. Let's find out. Okay, animals, rats, N of 24. So for those of you outside science, we represent our sample sizes by a large capital italicized letter N. That's all of the rats in the study. That probably means that half went into the active group and half went into the control group. So that's a 12 per group, which is pretty standard for this sort of study. So if we crawl back down here and we're looking at, this is probably all of the rats, so all 24 of them, that meant that the kind of top end of the 24 and the bottom end of that 24 are within these kind of bounds, or well, their error is within those bounds. And I don't want to get into what that specifically means, but suffice it to say, these lines would be kind of bigger like this if there was lots of differences. If there was lots of variability, you wouldn't have these really tight error bars. So what this tells me is they're all taking kind of about the same amount, and their responding has kind of leveled out during their training, which is good. And that means that all of these rats are probably had been taking approximately the same amount before going into the actual experimental paradigm. And why that matters is because there's something called sensitization. So sensitization is essentially kind of what it sounds like. It induces sensitivity to something. So there's desensitization, which a lot of people will be aware of, you know, like the hum of your refrigerator. You've become desensitized to that sound because it's always in the background. So you're less sensitive to hearing it. And maybe you become desensitized to some sort of touch or you know, whatever in your everyday life. But the opposite of that is also true. You can become sensitized to something, and that's a known phenomena in addiction research, such that the brain systems can actually upregulate or turn the volume and amounts up of a whole bunch of receptors in your brain, or turn down the metabolism of the drug, thus leaving more of the drug around or allowing the drug to activate more receptors. There's various ways that this can kind of work, but essentially having a sensitized system can come from being exposed to that drug more. There's also downregulation that can happen, and those happen in very different kind of contexts. But suffice it to say, in this case, what you would be worried about is if during training, some of the rats went and took a ton of drugs, their system might be sensitized. So then downstream, differences that you might see between those rats and the other rats, which up until now are the exact same. They've been treated the same. We haven't done, you know, their intervention, the pain intervention yet. These are just training days. So we want the rats to be the same, essentially. So what they should have done, in my opinion, is they should have shown each individual rat's data points so that we could see the true variability, but we'll take it because their error bars are quite small, which means low variability. So they're saying the rats successfully learned how to do the thing that we're going to be measuring, which is obviously an essential kind of baseline. That's not where the interesting results are. And what they're saying here is the CCI surgery, so the pain, decrease the paw withdrawal latency. That's again what we would expect. That's basically saying, okay, our surgical intervention to cause neuropathic pain in the rats that got pain caused a decrease in the amount of time it takes them to draw their paw away. So remember earlier I was saying if they're have a low latency. That means that they're being quicker about withdrawing their paw away from the painful stimulus, indicating hypersensitivity. So basically they're saying, we put them in pain and proved that they are indeed in pain by showing that their paw withdrawal latency is decreased relative, I'm guessing relative to the controls. They probably wouldn't explain that detail as deeply in this because it's abstract. So we're just going to assume that for now. So confirming the induction of neuropathic pain. Cool. Like what I said. CCI alone did not affect oxycodone self-administration. Okay, that's great. That's interesting. And some people might find this kind of counterintuitive, right? So because oxy is an analgesic, you would expect that the rats in the CCI group, the pain rats versus the sham rats, the control rats, that the ones in pain would take more painkiller. They didn't appear to find that. That would be shocking to someone outside of the pain field, but within the pain field, we actually know that opioids are not a very good way to treat neuropathic pain specifically. So we tend to treat that with something called gabapentin or pregabalin that act in a completely different system than an opioid analgesic because it's a different flavor of pain. It's a completely different kind of thing that you treat. That's not to say that oxycodone can't do anything, but that it doesn't tend to affect the actual sensation of the pain. What a lot of people report is, I still feel my pain, I care a lot less. Or I still feel my pain, but I'm able to sleep now, maybe because of the sedating effects. And these are clinical kind of anecdotal reports that say these sorts of things. So not surprising that it didn't change their oxycodone self-administration. I'm reading this wrong. It didn't change their self-administration. Yeah, no, I read that right. Sorry. So yeah, you would expect them to be different because you would think the ones that are in pain would take more painkiller, but they didn't see that. So this suggests to them that neuropathic pain does not substantially influence opioid intake at the dose tested. So I guess that's their doses that they listed up here. Okay, now treatment with CBD reduced oxycodone self-admin in both the sham and the CCI rats. Very interesting. So what they're saying here is they gave CBD to all the rats. Some of the rats had pain, some of them didn't. And CBD reduced the amount of drug that they took indiscriminately across the group. So it didn't matter if you had pain or if you didn't. It reduced the oxycodone self-admin in all the rats. Oxycodone self-administration in the CCI rats reversed the CCI-induced decrease in paw withdrawal latency. So oxycodone self-administration in CCI rats reversed the CCI-induced. Okay. Isn't that what they said this didn't do earlier? CCI alone didn't affect this. Okay. I'm not really sure what they're saying here, which is either saying something about my mental state, fine, or saying something about the clarity of this study. Oxycodone self-administration in the CCI rats reversed the CCI-induced. So there was CCI-induced decrease in paw withdrawal latency, as we expect. And oxycodone self-administration alleviated that decrease. So it rescued that decrease back to baseline. We'll look at these graphs in a second here. However, CBD did not affect the antinociceptive affect to the effect. I hate when people do that. This is one of my biggest pet peeves, the affect effect. So CBD did not impact, I'm going to say, the antinociceptive, so the pain-killing effects of oxycodone in CCI rats. Okay, so that's good. What they're saying here is, as the title suggests, the preservation of the analgesic efficacy. So they're saying here, okay, CBD, we're going to go for another color. CBD reduced the oxycodone self-administration, but CBD did not change the pain-killing effect of oxycodone in the rats that were experiencing pain. So as I suggested earlier, that's a pretty rock star finding, frankly. We're pretty happy with that. I actually quite like that. It kind of seems like uninteresting results at their first blush because it's a bunch of not null results, but you're not really dramatically changing something. You're observing the absence of something, which seems a lot less ooh la la than being like, Eureka, I have a discovery. It's Eureka, we didn't see this. Which is something that as a scientist, you have to kind of take your wins where you get them. So congratulations to this group. I know someone that worked for this person for a short amount of time, I want to say, down in Florida, Gainesville, which is neat. Okay, so taken together, this is their claim about these findings. These findings demonstrate that CBD reduces oxycodone self-administration without affecting antinociceptive effect. Why are these people repeating themselves like this? Of oxycodone in neuropathic pain. So it supports the potential of CBD to reduce opioid use and misuse regardless of pain status. Okay, so that's we like that. That's great. I want to get into a little bit of the details of how they study this, what this means. This is a pretty tidy kind of description. We don't need to go into a lot of the background here. So they're going to be telling us things about why this matters. Prescription opioid use in the United States widespread. Okay, yeah, we all know that. 12% of adults with an opioid prescription misuse opioids. That's lots. That means 12% of the people who are given the opportunity to take opioids are like, I'm doing this not the right way. So opioid misuse is a little bit different than abuse. An opioid use disorder is a little bit different than addiction. Saying the word addiction has kind of become so stigmatized that we don't even really talk about addiction directly as like a syndrome in and of itself. And you can misuse an opioid pretty easily. What the label for misuse is, typically, we would have to look at this actual study, but typically what it is, how do I make this stop being, I don't want to be coloring anymore. What this study, number 2 in our list here, prescription opioid use disorders among adults reporting prescription opioid use with or without misuse. Journal of Clinical Psychiatry, 2024. Okay, so these are pretty new stats. We like that. We like new stats. But I would want to, if I was doing a really close evaluation of the study, if I was the peer reviewer in this study, this might be something that I cared about. So I would want to look at what they consider misuse, because sometimes the cutoff is very easy to breach, and that's just taking it a little bit earlier. If it says take one every 4 to 6 hours as needed, and you're taking it every 3 hours, opioid misuse. And while that doesn't seem as extreme as crushing it up and snorting it, or dissolving it and injecting it, or smoking it, any of these things, that's a little bit more obvious misuse. But misuse can come in a little bit more subtle and nefarious sort of ways that can be problematic in and of themselves without being as dramatic sounding as, things that would cause like an overt diagnosis of an opioid use disorder. Okay. They talk about why people use drugs. That's lovely. Cannabis is widely used for the treatment of pain. We know that. We love that. But it also has psychoactive effects that produce abuse liability. Sure. It has a complex profile of cannabinoids. We also know that. Woo! Hello? What? Oh, what a DB. It doesn't say your thing because I see. Hello, what a DB. Welcome in. Thank you for being here. What a DB is a very busy person and is currently in a busy part of his day. So it's great to have him here. Yeah. So we're talking about the psychoactive effects. Cannabis having this complex profile of cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are just things that are associated with cannabis. And they have different pharmacological actions and therapeutic potential. THC is the main psychoactive constituent. Why not just call it compound? Like, come on. I don't know. When people make it, like, I do this. I wish that we didn't do this, but I do this when I write papers. I don't want to use the same word over and over again. So sometimes I'll, say things like constituent. We don't need to be that fancy. Why are we doing this, right? So this produces the euphoric effects? Sure. Okay. Yeah, it can cause euphoria. I'll get on board for that. And is responsible for its abuse liability. Now, this I have a little bit of a problem with. This is complete sidetrack, but I will say that not all drug abuse is because the drug feels good. If you ask any person that is in deep and active addiction to anything, coffee, cigarettes, or nicotine of any kind, harder drugs, when they're at the peak of their addiction, frequently you'll ask them, do you enjoy it anymore? And they'll say, nope, but I can't stop. So we know that the euphoric effects are not the only component of what perpetuates addiction. In fact, frequently that's the important part in initiating drug use. So people want to do stuff because they want to get high better than low, I suppose. So we think that has a lot to do with the initial trial of drugs and maybe the early use, but what causes downstream misuse and abuse tends to be something completely different, and that's very divorced from the pleasurable effects that are associated with that substance or that behavior, like gambling or sex or shopping or any of these sort of behavioral addictions that people have. In fact, gaming addiction is something that a lot of people are, usually play games for fun, but a lot of people that are addicted to gaming, half the time they're not having fun. And maybe that's a personal anecdote, but maybe it's not. Yeah. Speaking as someone that binges their games, I definitely have a little bit of gaming abuse. Some we'd call it. I don't know. But cannabidiol, as we talked about earlier, has a wide range of therapeutic properties, including analgesic, anti-inflammatory, anxiolytic, antidepressant, and anticonvulsant effects, but has no euphoric effects. I don't know how much this has actually been studied. I think our knowledge right now says all of those things. But knowing that cannabis is something that's really young, like the research around this is really young. Some of the best researchers that I know about this, one of them, Dr. Matthew Hill, was on my master's committee, actually. He's a fantastic scientist. He was on the Huberman Lab podcast because he got in a fight with Andrew Huberman on fucking Twitter. So he watched, because he's a really good cannabis scientist and actually, frankly, one of the better scientists that I know in everyday life. They're very scholarly, very, very nice person, really supportive. Anyways, so Huberman did a solo podcast where he talked about cannabis and THC and indica and sativa and reported a bunch of kind of like true stuff, but also a bunch of dubious shit. And Matt, my former master's committee member, is really active on Twitter at that time. He might still be. I'm not on Twitter anymore. But he went and fucking shredded him a new one. He was just like, this is incorrect, and basically got into beef with Huberman on Twitter, so much that Huberman DM'd him and said, like, we need to have you on the podcast, which honestly, respect. I a little bit respect that. I also recognize that it's a little bit impression management on his part because, frankly, he was called out from very well-known, scientists in that area for just saying incorrect things and things that can be, that are incorrect and harmful in that case. So I know it is a little bit of impression management, but if you do like listening to podcasts, Huberman's hit and miss for me. I'm not a big fan because of his interpersonal kind of world, the kind of person he is, the manosphere of it all. But that one in particular is rich with very interesting, very well explained information about the cannabinoid world in terms of research and where we're at and that sort of thing. So if you're interested, that's something that you might want to check out. That specific episode I can endorse. Pardon me. So this goes on in the background to describe that CBD has complex pharmacology. Cannabinoids are something that we refer to as a neuromodulator a lot of times, which basically means CBD's everywhere in the brain. Like there's nowhere that it's not, and it interacts with all different types of receptors. So this transient receptor potential vanilloid 1, or what we call TRPV1, it interacts with those channels, serotonin, lots of people know that from SSRIs, and GABA A receptors, as well as opioid and dopaminergic receptor systems, aka the entire brain, essentially. Basically what they're saying, it has complex pharmacology and it interacts in multiple ways, and that's why we refer to it as a neuromodulator, because basically it's going in and tuning little things. So this is the difference between, I was going to have a messy metaphor, and I don't think I'm going to go for it because I don't think it holds up. But basically, it's going to fine tune and manage the relationship between certain parts of the brain and others, or certain systems that communicate between different parts of the brain, like dopamine and serotonin and GABA and stuff like that. And we can do maybe a separate stream on what each of these are, because that would take another, frankly, several hours just to explain what these are and how they work. It took me years, frankly, to learn all of the nitty gritty about that. And I still don't know it in and out, because that's just how complex the brain is. They're talking about this purified form of CBD approved for treatment of seizures. Yeah, we know that. This is one of the few kind of like specific uses for like medical actual applications outside of just people's kind of self-determined use. So glaucoma and this specific seizure disorder are the only two that are actually treated with this in like a prescription styles setting. So let's skip down to what they did, how they did it and stuff like that, or maybe we'll go to the results or something like that. Yeah, you know what, let's go to this section and talk about their experimental design a little bit more closely. They do food training. Now, food training, what did they do for food training? Did they train their animals to use this thing by training them with food first? What? Okay. Yeah, they were. Okay, so this is wild. Frankly, this is wild. I've never heard of this. Okay, so the rats were trained to press a lever for food pellets over a 10-day period. And then 1 week after the food training sessions, all rats underwent the jugular vein catheterization surgery, blah, blah, blah. And then they had 4 days to enable over 4 days. Oh, I see. All of their surgeries occurred in the span of 4 days. See, this wording matters. Wording matters. Be precise, people. Animals were given 7 days to recover. That's good. After recovery, a food reminder session was conducted, and to confirm that the rats retained lever pressing behavior. Okay, this is all really weird and superfluous. I don't know that I've never needed to train rats how to use a lever, and that actually might contribute to why they're seeing some of the lever pressing kind of, I guess, the low lever pressing and lack of discrimination that you see that we talked about here. I would suspect that might be why, because they kind of muddled the meaning of these and just said this means reward, not this means drug reward or specifically opioid reward. So Better Off Ted. Welcome in, Better Off Ted. Thank you for being here. Could weed help treat pain without risking addiction? No, you're almost always going to have the risk of addiction unless someone is immune to addiction, ? So then it is just what percentage of risk may be IDK. Okay, let's break that down. It's important. And thank you so much for having a question and articulating kind of your take on it. And what I'll say as someone that's an addiction specialist is you're right. Addiction risk is something that can only be abolished by complete abstinence from that drug forever. So yes, in that sense, I'm just going to expand this out here so I can see your full comment. Could weed help treat pain without risking addiction? No. However, could it mitigate the risk of addiction when using opioids to treat pain? I think this study supports that is possible. And that's important, right? Because while we could avoid the opportunity for opioid addiction by just never prescribing them, no one ever gets an opioid ever again. They can't get addicted to opioids, pretend that the illicit market doesn't, work, because then they would just find off, market ways to do that. But in absence of that, if they don't have access to it, they can't abuse it. However, if they don't have access to that, they also don't have this way to treat the pain. So you would be basically choosing between the two. You'd be like, okay, we can avoid addiction, which is a risk of treating the pain, but you have to live with your pain, assuming that it can't be treated in other ways, or it's a severe enough pain syndrome to warrant the use of a strong opioid like oxycodone or fentanyl or any of those sorts of things. So yes, but people, especially in medicine, we talk about the duty to do no harm, but also the duty to treat. So it's the difference between these kind of ethical concepts called beneficence and non-maleficence. So beneficence is do as much good as possible, and non-maleficence is do as little bad as possible. So there's kind of always a balance between things, right? Do you give someone proper CPR to save their lives if you know that you're going to break their ribs? If you're coming from the do no harm, absolutely no harm end of things, you don't, right? You're like, I'm not going to intervene and cause additional harm. What happens to them naturally, I am not causing. And so you would get out on that kind of technicality there, right? But most people that get into medicine would intervene because saving someone's life has more beneficence, does more good than the bad kind of costs, I guess. So using that sort of kind of concept, that same sort of thing, I would say treat pain and risk addiction. Yes, because pain is the number one thing that people go to the doctor for. It's the number one thing that most people experience. It's a universal experience. It's something that needs to be treated. It's unethical to not treat it from my perspective. I think most people would agree with that. You can break someone's ribs to do CPR. Yeah. And frankly, you should be pressing hard enough that that's a risk. Lots of people, when you see in television people giving CPR, frequently they're not doing a very good job of demonstrating it, because if they're doing it on a real human being, it's dangerous. You're trying to compress your rib cage enough to squeeze your heart in a meaningful fashion. So imagine it's a 200-pound man, which is the standard in medicine. That's the comparator, which is fucking bullshit. Imagine you're a 200-pound man. They're like that thick. Like I'm that thick, and I'm not that big. So someone falls over and is having a heart attack and you have to give CPR. You're not going to be able to use your arm strength to do anything that's going to be meaningful. You have to put your whole body into it, and it is work, which is why if you see you got to go deep, baby. Dougie Litcha says, yes, absolutely. You have to press hard enough on the sternum to hit up against the heart and to squeeze it in a way that's not just going to squeeze it a little bit, but is going to propel the blood through the body and push some back in by virtue of it being a closed system. So yeah, is there a way to do CPR without breaking a rib? I think there is. It probably depends on the person doing it. It probably depends on the amount of visceral fat, muscles, and bone density. I mean, if it's an 80-year-old woman, you're probably going to break some ribs just because of the brittleness and osteoporosity of, women of that age just tend to have more brittle and not dense bones. So they'll be more easy to break. Could they survive the rib break? Absolutely. People break their ribs all the time. They for sure would survive that. And most of the time when you're breaking these things, it's not going to be like a snap a pencil sort of break. It's going to be kind of a crunch a pencil, when they'll like kind of fracture a little bit. And those sorts of things, they heal, right? I'm praying the day never comes when I have to do it on a flight. Oh, girl. Yeah, you know what? Dougie Licious is a flight attendant. I hope that isn't doxing you too much. You made it pretty clear. I feel like we're safe here. Dougie Licious is a flight attendant. I've been on some flights that have had medical emergencies. Yo, it's stressful. That's part of the reason I used to hate flying. I'm better with it now because I do it so frequently for like conferences and work and stuff like that. But boy, oh boy, it was pretty rough being on there with the medical emergencies. And they do call for, is there a doctor on board? They do that. That's not just a TV thing. And if you don't have a doctor, they'll be like, is there any nurses on board? Is there anyone with medical training? And they'll go down the list. They'll be like, is there anybody that knows anything about this at all? Or at least on the flight, the thing that I was on, they would. Dougie Licious, if you care to, what is the word I'm looking for? Entrance us? No. If you care to share with us what the protocol is to call for a doctor. I had a medical just like a couple weeks ago. That's wild. It's scary. People die on planes, man. Close to the ground. Yeah. Dude, we can talk offline, but let me tell you, that flight into LaGuardia got me shooketh. That's a flight that I full-blown would have taken when I was going back and forth between, the place I used to live and other places. Which is wild because those, yeah. Anyways, stay safe out there, guys. Wear your seatbelt on the fucking plane. Do it. Oh my God. Yeah, I was working that day. I was so shaken. Yeah, geez. I hope that there's like mental health support for those sorts of things when that sort of stuff kind of happens to flight attendants and to people in the aviation industry. Especially flight traffic controllers, man. Flew into the US the day it happened. Zoink, Scoob. For those of you that don't know, I'm talking about the flight from Montreal to LaGuardia that happened, 2 days ago, and crashed into a fire truck that was responding to a weird smell on another plane that they were worried about was maybe some sort of noxious something that could harm the crew and passengers. So that's sad because 2 people died. One of the people was very young and from Montreal, where I used to live, which is sad. We're definitely not going to cover this whole paper. I am sorry. I talked a little bit too much at the front. You know what? I'm not sorry. I said I'm sorry, but I'm not. I'm lying to you. Okay, let's keep going. Maybe I can cover the back end of this on a separate day. But it is very weird that they're using food training to train them on the manipulanda, is what we called it. So like levers and buttons and stuff like that are things that you can manipulate to cause an effect in this cause an effect, not cause and effect, to elicit some sort of result. In a self-administration model, it would be, in this case at first, the delivery of a food pellet, and then they switch it to delivery of a drug, which is, I don't know why you would do that. But they do that, apparently. And they do something called a fixed ratio 1 schedule, which basically means that, well, as the name suggests, the delivery of the reward, whether it's drug or food in this case, or other various things, is a 1-to-1 ratio. So 1 response equals 1 reward in this case. So there's such thing as an FR4 would be another one where it takes 4 responses to equal 1 reward delivery, and another 4 to have another 1 delivery. There's also something called a progressive ratio scale, which basically means it takes increasing amounts of responding to elicit the same amount of reward. And we use that frequently in addiction science, in preclinical rodent models, to evaluate how much the rat is willing to work for the drug. Because these rats will do, like, I'm talking 10,000 lever presses to get 1 hit of the drug. And frequently, when you're doing addiction research, the manipulations that we do, so I used to do early life stress research, the rats that were early life stressed were more likely to press the lever more intensely or work harder for a single dose of the drug than the ones that didn't undergo early life stress, which isn't the most surprising thing in the world, but it certainly is a useful thing to know. So anyway, so that's what fixed ratio 1 is. As I suggested earlier, there is a 20-second timeout. I guess that's during the food reminder. I don't know why you would time them out of food, but whatever. Then they were trained to acquire oxycodone self-administration. We talked about the amount in the infusions on the same schedule. So 1 response equals 1 infusion of the drug. They have a 20-second timeout, so they can't get another response for 20 seconds. That's also going to cause the training to take a little bit of time because of that temporal kind of alignment that I was talking about earlier. 120-minute sessions, so that's 2 hours for 14 sessions. So 2 weeks of 2-hour sessions. That's a lot of work, frankly. For 12 rats, if you didn't have 12 chambers, you'd have to do it in like waves throughout the day. So say you had 4 chambers, you'd have to do 3 2-hour waves, which I used to have to do. And it sucks. That's why I slept in the lab. Healthy. Okay. Selected based on previous work. This reliably maintains. They're just talking about the self-administration. Okay. So this is an important part. This is what we call, I thought that I was, I thought that I was like dragging the thing, not like coloring on it. So I thought it was just going to catch the whole thing. So what they're doing in this sentence, what they're describing is what's called counterbalancing. So this is the left lever served as the active lever for 11 of the rats, while the right lever served as the active lever for 12 rats. So essentially, they're making sure that there's no secret effect of left versus right, because in most cases, how the chambers are set up is such that the left-hand side of the chamber or the right-hand side of the chamber will always be closer to the door that they go in on versus closer to the back of the external housing, because they don't just chill around in the open air like this. They're usually in a little cabinet that's closed, and then I'm going to try and find a picture of what it actually looks like. So this is kind of showing it. So see how it's in this outside cabinet? This is obviously a very different system, but just pretend that this is the self-administration chamber that I was describing before. It's inside another little thing that frequently has a little fan to create like masking noise or white noise, so that if you open and close the door and whatever, their sensitive hearing isn't gonna be distracted from the task at hand. So it's important to make it so that you don't put the lever on a side that's going to have a meaning outside of what you assign it. In this case, assigning the lever, the active lever, the meaning of this, responding on this will elicit drug, and inactive not. So maybe the one that's closer to the door is something that they're scared to approach because that is, where the sounds come from and the things are up against the wall. So it's a lot more muffled on that end. So you want to counterbalance that just to make sure that there isn't any secret effect of left or right. And that's just kind of standard operating procedure at this point. If you don't counterbalance, it's kind of weird. Some people will not counterbalance because they've done this counterbalanced way and found that there was no effect of left or right. So you could run this as a variable to see if the left ones responded more than the right ones. And if there wasn't, then you could in the future feasibly just always use the left one because you didn't find an effect of it in the first place and you presume that that hasn't changed. So that's just one way to kind of fine-tune science. Oxycodone infusion acquired This is a lot of detail. Food training. Wild that they did food training. Catheter implantation. That's a little bit maybe gritty for folks that tend to like animals, as myself, one of those people. Definitely learning about jugular catheterizations was a little bit like intense. We do try to manage their pain, and they are under, serious anesthesia and adequately anesthetized the entire time. But yeah, it's a pretty gruesome surgery. You open them up in 2 different spots to catheterize the jugular vein. The CCI surgery is obviously a little bit less invasive because it's on the thigh. We talked about the thermal paw withdrawal test. We're not going to talk about statistics because frankly, it's fucking boring. It's pretty interesting, but I don't care. We already looked at these graphs, so let's swing past that and talk about some of the actual data here. So it looks like their top left is the Hargreaves test, so the paw withdrawal latency post CCI day 5. So this is just the main effect, it looks like, of pain prior to the 4th and 5th baseline oxycodone self-administration. What? I did it again. Prior to the 4th, post-CCI day 10, and 5th, post-CCI day 11, baseline oxycodone self-administration sessions. Huh? I need to wrap my head around this. This is the importance of good writing. Before IVSA. Okay, so this is before they're taking any drugs, but after they got the pain. They're showing this 5 days after they got the pain, 10 days after they got the pain, and 11 days after they got the pain. I don't know why specifically those days, but sure. I guess they're trying to show that it's enduring, and that it has an effect kind of immediately. It's a little interesting that they do all of this before they start their actual experimental timeline, because CCI, unlike SNI, does resolve eventually. Don't know why. I actually should know that, but I don't. I'm so sorry for yawning. Stay hydrated, folks. Hydration break. Yeah, starting your experimental protocol that many days after the surgery is a little bit crazy, just because it can resolve, but I mean, it seems to have worked for them. So what we're looking at is the latency on the y-axis, the up and down axis here, in number of seconds. So it looks like the right paw control, so this is the right-hand side that didn't receive any surgeries, and the left paw that received either the sham surgery, so that's the controls, or the active pain, that we're seeing basically that those that had pain on their left-hand side, this is another, I'm gonna just kind of rip this to shreds a little bit right now. If you have a right and a left that you want to represent on a bar graph that starts from the left and goes to the right, why is the one that is the right paw on the left? That's preposterous. Why on earth would you do that? I know why on earth they would do that, because the standard in our industry is to put the control first and then the active following it. I think that that's a fine way to go in life, in science, as like kind of a general rule. I do think when your things are actually left and actually right, that they should be on the left and the right. I think that's like one of the notable exceptions. Why would you not? Also, these colors are abysmal. Why would you use this weird kind of taupey brown and blue? Just simply why? Also, why so small? Also, why legend over here when plenty of space here? Why legend over here? Oh, what have I done? Oh dear. Okay. Anyways, that's just how I feel about these things. So, as you would expect, the side that got the surgery, the left paw on the right here in the diagram, in the ones that got the actual surgery, not the fake surgery, that the paw withdrawal threshold, they took their paw away faster because they were more hypersensitive. So this is lower here than any of the other ones. Not significantly lower, it looks like, though. So on day 5, let's just take away a whole bunch of this complaining that I did. On day 5, this is not significantly different. It's noticeably different to our eye, but statistically, when they run these numbers, this is not statistically different from any of these by the looks of it here. However, by day 10, you'll notice that there's some little stars here. That's how we denote that there's a statistically significant difference according to the type of statistic that you would use. And this is usually an ANOVA. You don't need to know that. It's an analysis of variance. That's what that stands for. But essentially, what they're showing is that it starts trending that way at day 5 and becomes significant by day 10. You can also see that our right paws seem to get up a tiny bit, which is interesting to me. And there's not much change in the left paw of the ones that got the fake surgery. And this persists 1 day later. I don't know why we're showing these specific days, but we are. And this one has 3 asterisks, which probably means that it is super significant. So this is how we denote significance in most of the science that I do. So in this study, our P, our significance, is less than 0.01, which basically means that the likelihood of getting that result is like less than that percentage. If in absence of your, like, getting it via chance. It's a really shit explanation of what a p-value is, by the way. But essentially what we're looking for is for the p to be as small as possible. That might sound counterintuitive to some of you. I crack myself up, and that's all that really matters. That's all that really matters, guys. So you don't want a big P in here. And basically, P less than 0.05 is what most people's threshold is. So the fact that these are less than 0.01 and less than 0.001, more stars equals better and more significant, generally speaking. Though that's up for debate as well. Okay, our next figure. What other figure did we miss? No, we did this. Figure 2, figure 3. Okay, we're already on figure 4. Love that. Okay, now these are the intravenous self-administration, IVSA days, for oxycodone. So they were given the chance to go in these little chambers and give themselves drugs. That's a good representative of this. Oh, that's going to be a video. No? Yeah, look at that guy. This is exactly what that looks like. Mind the graph. Interesting. Okay, so yeah, that's a little drawing of what it would look like. So that guy's in there responding for 2 hours every day for, they're representing 5 sessions here. Day 6 to 11. Okay, so they don't show us the first 5 days. They must have it in a supplementary or something like that. I'm just going to scroll down. Sometimes they put less useful. Yeah, there's supplements here. Okay, so they probably have the other days in the supplementary. There's frequently a character limit in publications, or a space limit or a page limit, where you can only put, you're forced to only put your most important kind of main data in an image or in your text, and then you can have additional explanations that are kind of due diligence science, but not really the nitty-gritty and important stuff. You can have that in a supplemental, so that if people that are really closely in your field can go and be like, how many milligrams per kilogram, what type of chow did you use, was it humidity tested, all of that kind of stuff. Which, to be clear, does matter, but is not the most important part of the story, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So I wonder if that's why they did that. It's also possible that they did that because it looked bad before this and they're manipulating their data. That's possible. People do that. They shouldn't do that, but they do. And frequently they shouldn't do that, but they do, not because they're bad people or bad scientists, but because otherwise they wouldn't get published. And maybe they shouldn't get published because they're messy and misleading, but also maybe they should get published because they're valuable and provide valuable information despite being messy. So that's a little bit of my personal ethos when it comes to publishing. There's something called the file drawer effect, where you have a whole bunch of studies that the results aren't publishable, but they are interesting, or you have a whole bunch of null results, which basically is our independent variable, our manipulation had no effect. And the fact that we don't publish null results in science is a little bit fucking crazy, frankly, because if you just think about it, okay, how many people have thought of like one scientific idea and over time, right? Like, oh, we should test if, early life adversity changes addiction propensity. Yeah, because we're the first people to fucking think of that. Of course we're not. Of course we're not. And yes, some people had studied it before I studied it, which I don't even do anymore, by the way. But possibly they studied it and found that in this rodent model of early life adversity, it had no effect. But because that's not published, I'm going to go and do that study thinking, great idea, and maybe use some of the same manipulations that they found didn't work. But because it didn't get published, because it's a null result, I have no way of knowing that. So me and maybe 9 other labs in the world waste half of their master's degree doing something. And frankly, it did work in my case. I was just using an example that seemed kind of intuitive. But the point is, very few ideas are novel. Most things have been thought of and studied. It makes science extremely hard, but it is made even harder by the fact that we don't tell each other what doesn't work because it's not publishable. It's not a money generator. It's not an attention generator. And because I kind of lost my train of thought. I got distracted by the background on my other computer in my room here. That's okay. I was going on a diatribe that probably didn't need to be labored upon at that length, so sorry. Okay, we have differences in the active versus the inactive. That's circles versus squares, black versus red for those of you that have full color vision. Lucky you. I also do. So they're doing, look at this. Okay, why would you represent this like this? So this is just going to be me, again, looking at the way that data is represented. So they're looking at the number of lever responses per 2 hours, and it looks like the absolute tops that they get is 50, but they make a graph that goes up to 100. For what reason? Why is all this space just being wasted? What are we doing here? It's one thing to do this where there's blank space in the bottom because you don't tend to want to make a break in your y-axis because that's less intuitive to kind of like wrap your head around. But this above here is not. It's just simply not necessary to leave that all blank. I understand keeping your legend inside the graph space. Unlike what they did here, putting it with like just so much white space in between unnecessarily. Like this frankly could have been a 3-panel, like a much smaller set of images. It just didn't need to take up that much space. Also, can we just address that this doesn't match, that the top of this graph is not the top of this graph and the bottom of this graph? I'm so peculiar about this sort of stuff, but I think it matters. They match here. They match the titles, but they don't match the tops and bottoms. It's just askew. It's not even like they're not the same size. They are. I'm going to stop complaining about that because it's almost time for me to be done, which is crazy because I'm not done yet, but I am going to be done. How many people wrote this? I'm so glad that you noticed that too, Dougie-licious. How many people wrote this? So chances are one person wrote this and a lot of people did the work associated with it. So chances are this person wrote the manuscript. It's possible that this person wrote the manuscript as well. Frequently in academic publishing, what happens is the first author is the person who's project it was primarily. This is usually a graduate student or a postdoc or an early career investigator that's not well established and doesn't run their own lab, but did the bulk of the work. So my PhD publications will be ones where I'm listed first. My boss, whose lab it was in, will be last. So this, chances are, and there's a little list that tells you exactly who did what, usually at the very end. So we can actually see. It'll say so-and-so wrote the paper, blah, blah, blah. We'll find it. We'll find it. We will not find it. It's probably... Oh, here we go. Author contributions. So our first author, writing, wrote the original draft. Project administration, meep, mop, moop. Okay, second author. They ran the administration. That's a lot of work. They should be second author. This person helped write the original draft and helped with the visualization. I assume that means their images that we're shredding them on. This person, Wendy, did not help write. This person helped review and edit. So this means they weren't composers of the original draft. That was still these guys. Writing, reviewing, and editing was also done by this Marcello. Barry Setlow is the person who I know, someone that used to work for them. They were conceptualization and resources. This meant this guy's grant probably paid for this. Writing, reviewing, and editing of the writing. So again, not original composition. Reviewing and editing. Funding acquisition. So this is whose money. That's whose money paid for this, is this Nubert. Now, just because it says that doesn't mean it's true. But it goes through so many hands. Like nobody thought, hey, let's level these graphs out. Yeah, I would like to think that the copy editors at a Nature affiliated paper, Nature being like a pretty highly regarded publication, but this isn't like their flagship Nature. This is Scientific Reports Nature. So it's not like they're most important, and they probably pay their copy editors garbage. So the copy editor probably doesn't care. And if no one is going to like write a letter to the editor and be like, do better, which frankly, even though it annoys me, I'm not going to do that. I don't got time for that. Then yeah, they probably aren't paid enough to care. Lots of scientists are not very good at making images. This is kind of a garbage image. Number one, if you print this in black and white because you don't have a color printer because it's not 1994, then these are going to look really similar, right? Like the squares and the circles are not meaningfully different enough. They're not big enough to be meaningfully different. If I just kind of like zoom out a little bit, move my face back. But if I was looking at this, say on a slide or something like that during like a talk, and I was far enough away, I wouldn't be able to distinguish those two. And if I was colorblind, then I'd be fucked. So number one, accessibility, shit. Number two, clarity, also shit. Why not make them two different colors and like a larger circle that's, you know, two distinguishable colors? I don't know. Fair point. Show me triangles and squares. Yeah, I mean, I have strong opinions about how data should be represented, and I think my graphs are really pretty. But everyone has their own opinions. I would never do these this way color-wise. I would do the dots differently. I would do a lot of stuff differently. But like, why are we using an underscore in our titles? And why is it there and here? Like, why? That's, you want to know what that is? That's laziness. That's laziness on the part of the people. No, I take it back. That person might be very overworked, and it might be, this is good enough. I've done that before. It might be diminishing returns because no one's going to say, oh, a more amazing paper because of your graphs were so aligned. No one's going to give you snaps for that. So why would you use your time to do that? I guess at the end of the day, the science is on the page. Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if we paid people at all parts of the chain enough to care and gave them enough support to feel like they didn't have to cut corners and say good enough, assuming that that is what this person did. I hate that I assumed that it was because they were lazy, because frankly, I don't even really believe in laziness. I think if someone is so reluctant to do work, that usually it's because of a reason, not because they're intrinsically bad, that they have bad motivation. But that's really besides the point. What we're showing here is that after they get pain, a week after they get pain, that's what, no, that can't be why. They said they gave them 7 days to recover. So this shouldn't be, It's because the work they're doing, 100%, yeah. Anyways, so oxycodone self-administration, they did more active lever presses than they did inactive lever presses. World of wonder. The differences between the sham group, the ones that got the fake surgery and the ones that got the real surgery, was not different. A somewhat unexpected result, depending on who you are talking to. They took more or less the same amount of drug, which is important. That means that these groups were equally sensitized, which we talked about earlier. Now, if we go to the CBD and oxycodone IBSA, so intravenous self-administration, 20 minutes after the CBD treatment. So it looks like they injected them in the intraperitoneal cavity. And then 20 minutes after, they put them into the chamber and allowed them to self-administer the oxycodone, just as they were doing up here. Even though here they're showing it in a line graph and here they're showing it in a bar graph. There's just better ways to show this. Why are they doing this? Okay, so they're showing it by dose along the x-axis. I kind of get why they're doing this, but I don't love it. So this is the high dose, 10 milligrams per kilogram of CBD, medium, low, and none. And they're showing the amount of active lever presses that they are doing, and thus the amount of infusions of oxycodone that they're doing, whether or not they were in the fake surgery or the full pain group. Also, why is this not aligned over here? Why is there not some sort of demarcation between the two? If you're going to put them in the same graph, you can just separate them with space. But if you're going to do that, move your title over too. If anyone ever wants visual editing, your girl's the person. Your girl is the person. I'm amazing at this sort of stuff, if I do say so myself, which I do. So no meaningful differences. It looks like there might be a slightly lower active lever responding in the CCI group that get the higher doses of the CBD. Again, this is something that would be a lot easier to see if we cut the the y-axis off here. Now, that can sometimes be seen as like shady in the industry to change your axes to show the data differently. Because basically, if you stretched this out, then this might look a lot different to these. But right now, what they're saying is statistically, they're the same. But I'm going to use a little pen thing here. What we're looking at here is essentially these guys take, let's say, 25 to 30 infusions per 2 hours of the oxycodone. And while that's not statistically significantly different, these guys are taking more like 20. I know this isn't a straight line, but like that's not the same. You know what I mean? And it's important that it's not statistically significant, because even though it doesn't look the same to my eye, it's not different enough. This might have might have been borne out if they had a higher N, if they had more individual rats to show these differences, just because of natural variance from individual to individual. But if you stretched this out, what you would see if you had 50 be the top is that you would be able to kind of detect the scale of difference between the two. So what might be the case, and this is just potentially, I'm not trying to cast aspersions against these authors at all for this, though I have shaded them for a couple other things. It might be that they wanted to diminish the amount of differences or the appearance of the differences. Because why stop at 90? Why not go to 100? Like, that's just a cleaner number. It's just no. Because you want to know what? Why not go to 120 if you're doing 2 hours? Or why not stop at 60 if you're doing it in hour chunks? None of this makes sense. This has got to be either A, they're using a template from a previous graph that had a meaningful difference there, which I doubt, or they deliberately chose this because it made it look a certain way. That's just my opinion. We'll wrap up relatively soon. I'm going to probably rate out, but this is 20 minutes after it. See, what's the difference between these? What is the difference? Why are we... The titles are the exact same. Am I losing it? Oh no, this is inactive, see? Why would you not put that in the title? I don't... Guys, why are we doing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I even reading this paper, frankly? Why am I doing it? Oh boy. This is the raw intake in milligrams per kilogram and number of infusions. That's pretty important. Number of infusions is lower. This is actually kind of a big important thing because remember, we have that 20-second timeout. So they can measure these active lever presses, and it's possible that a lot of these active lever presses are not rewarded because of the timeout. Because you can imagine a rat going and being like, give me drug, give me drug, give me drug, give me drug. They can do that easily 10 times in 20 seconds, easily 20 times in 20 seconds. So it's possible that a lot of their responding was not getting rewarded because of that built-in timeout that's designed to keep them from overdosing. So I guess showing these two different things is important. But again, we have this kind of like potentially meaningful difference of this being fewer than 20 and then these higher numbers, that's a terrible, not straight line, being, guys, one day I'll be effective. But basically it looks like it's kind of about 30 for the higher ones. And these are noticeably lower. They're noticeably lower. That doesn't mean statistically significant. And you have to take that with a grain of salt. But I'd be dubious if it were me. I'd be dubious because it's a weed paper. Hilarious. I'm hilarious. I will take applause. I will take flowers at this time. I will be accepting gifts, compliments, you name it. Yeah. I don't know that I want to get into too much more of it, but there's only one more thing. So let's just cover it. Okay. So when they give them CBD, it doesn't matter how much they're giving them. Why does this vertical line keep applying? Okay, it doesn't matter how much they give them, and it doesn't matter which group they're in. There's no statistically significant differences in their inactives, their actives, the amount of drug in milligrams per kilogram they get, or the number of infusions that they took to get to that milligrams per kilogram. And when we look at the Hargreaves test in another diabolically hard to read graph, this line is probably the 50% line, I'm guessing. Percentage from baseline. Oh. Tell me what this line is, sir. Tell me what the line is. Okay, so it's at like 7? Approximately 7? Okay. Percentage change from baseline. Okay. The average of post-CCI days 10 and 11. At baseline CCI surgery, reduced post-withdrawal latency. Plus sign indicates significantly lower absolute post-withdrawal. I gotta assume that that is their baseline line. So this is the average baseline responding of their post-withdrawal threshold in the baseline days. And this is the comparison, but they don't make that clear. So what are we doing here? Doesn't look like there's any differences there. Looks like there might be a bit of differences here. We don't see any significance, so that is important, but it does look like in the animals that got the pain and had the opportunity to self-administer the oxycodone intravenously at all the doses had a 150%. Their thing went up. Okay. This is such a dumb way to do this. Oh my God. Okay. I would love to show you guys my paper and how I'd represent this. So if this is a baseline, I'm going to end on this because I'm upset. If this is a baseline and you're wanting to show things as above or below that baseline, then you should do that. Not like these graphs should be a little bar here, a little bar here, and like that, so that the difference is a lot more noticeable, because this is not intuitive. They're saying that the paw withdrawal latency, so the amount of time that it took them to withdraw their paw away in these conditions over here in the shams that got all of these different doses of drugs, actually decreased in these doses of CBD, and that it meaningfully increased above this baseline dotted line in when they had pain and got the CBD. So it looks like it's necessary for them to have pain for the CBD to have an effect on paw withdrawal latency in after they've had the intravenous self-administration. So the effect of oxy, yeah, interesting. Okay, just a shitty way to show this. Maybe one day I will show you guys my research and how I show data, because it's just better than this. But I think we're going to leave it there because that's their last piece of info. I think that we covered a decent amount of stuff. Does that mean the CBD works on pain? That means that the CBD doesn't interfere with the ability of the oxycodone to treat pain. So, and it actually appears, according to their interpretation of those data, which I don't know how much I agree with, that it reduces the self-administration of the oxycodone. So the oxycodone's analgesic effects were the same. And when you give cannabidiol, CBD, alongside the oxycodone, they appear to need less of it. While that might kind of at the surface indicate that maybe cannabidiol is having its own analgesic effect, and that's why the oxycodone goes down, what they showed is that the paw withdrawal threshold, like the pain responding, wasn't different. So it appears that this is uniquely applying to the oxycodone self-administration and not changing any of their actual pain responding. So that's kind of an important thing. It appears as though it's having an effect on the rat's, I'm going to be generous with this, desire to take the oxycodone, which could be indicative of their kind of addictive potential, right? So that's pretty cool. And the reason that I chose this is, number one, I think I'm going to present it at a lab meeting pretty soon. So I wanted to give it kind of a close read. And number two, it's interesting. It's cool. It's new. And number three, I study a drug called suvorexant, which is used to treat narcolepsy and is already on the market. And I do basically a very similar kind of approach. I want to see if it can treat pain and not, and basically, how am I going to say this? We basically want to see if it's able to treat the effects of opioid withdrawal, which we know is some of the motivation to continue opioid use is to avoid withdrawal. So if you can have something that you co-administer with the opioid that might decrease those withdrawal effects, then that would be great, because that would decrease that component or contribution to perpetuating opioid use and misuse and subsequent addiction. So that's kind of what I'm up to right now. Science rules. I should get an emote of Bill. But I'm just getting this back on track as like an even remotely aesthetic looking thing. So if you guys could stick around, I'd love to find a raid target and raid out. And yeah, thank you so much for those of you that participated in chat. Thank you so much for the lurkers. I don't know how to, I have to turn off the desktop audio. Turn off the desktop audio, right? Because otherwise you're gonna hear it. Is that person still live? I believe, maybe. It looks like they are. Yes, they are. So we're going to raid Racodactylus. 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 We're just going to go ahead and cheeky mute this. I will need to copy this. Copy link. I don't want to copy the link address. I just want to copy the text. C. Copy C. Here we go. Ah! Too many things. Show me the old girl. Oh, a pup. All right. She hurt her leg. Honey. Honey. Are you in bed? She's in bed. Hold, please. Honey. Are you cozy? Yeah. Okay. I'm so sorry. I will give you a pup redeem at any time later. She's pretty cozy right now. The fact that she doesn't want to get up means her little leggy hurts. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to disrupt her. But we are going to find a raid target /raid. Meep. Racodactylus. Racodactylus. There we go. Okay, please stick around for the raid. I've only watched 1 or 2 of this guy's streams, but really woke takes, lots of interesting and really well thought out and researched takes on trans representation in science, how belief systems work, really interesting stuff. So highly endorse this even after only 1 or 2 streams. So let's do that. Let's create, I did it in the wrong thing again. Why am I like this? Okay, how do I do this? What do I do? Oh no. Yeah, here. I do it here. Okay. Yeah. The raid has been created. Okay. Raid now. Raid now? Raid now. Oh God. I'm ready to raid. Raid now. All right. See y'all later.